How's it going, YouTube? Welcome to part 16 to Intro to GUI in Java series. Today we're going to be talking about layouts. Alright, let's get straight to the code. Layouts in Java are used to organize GUI components. There are a total of 8 layouts in Java. Today we're only going to be talking about 4 of those layouts: FlowLayouts, GridLayouts, BorderLayouts, and CardLayouts. FlowLayouts treat your components like a queue or a line. Starting from the left, each component is added to the right. If there isn't enough space, the next component will be added to a new line. For our flow layout example, we're creating a calculator. For our data fields, we have a panel, a bottom panel, a text field, a label, 6 buttons, and 2 flow layouts. In our constructor, our first panel is our main panel, and it contains our first flow layout. So the constructor for the flow layout is the first one, which represents how you want your components aligned. Second, how much space you want between your components horizontally. And lastly, how many space you want between your components vertically. For the first 0, you can also say flow layout dot. You can choose your components to be centered, leading, left, right, or trailing. Next, we have our text field, which is added to our main panel, and it has a dimension of 500 width and 100 pixels long. Always make sure when you're using layouts that you set a preferred size for each of your components. Next, for our bottom panel, we have a flow layout with 14 spacing.
What?
14 pixels for our horizontal spacing and 5 pixels for our vertical spacing. And then we also add our bottom panel to our main panel. For our bottom panel, we have our 6 buttons for our calculator. In our action perform method, we set the text of what number button the user clicks. So let's run our program. We have our text field, which is part of our main panel. Then we have our bottom panel, which is this whole yellow part right here, contains our 6 buttons. So our buttons goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then when it's not enough space, our 6 buttons starts a new line. Then for our action perform method, we click 1, we have 1 in our text field. Click 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, now it's time to discuss the grid layout. Grid layouts act as a table for your components, using rows and columns. For our grid layout example, we're going to create another calculator. So for our data fields, we have our main panel, our first grid layout, text field, our top panel, our second grid layout, then our bottom panel, and our third grid layout. Then we also have 9 buttons for our new calculator. In our constructor, our main panel will have the first grid layout, which will be 2 rows and 1 column, because the first row is going to contain our text field and the second row is going to contain our buttons, bottom panel containing our buttons. So when you create a grid layout object, our first parameter is the number of rows, our second parameter is number of columns, next is the horizontal spacing, and then lastly is the vertical spacing. For our grid layout 1, it's going to be 1 by 1, so 1 row, 1 column, which contains our top panel, which also contains our text field. For our second grid layout, is going to be 3 by 3, which will be added to our bottom panel, which contains 9 buttons. So when we run our program, we have our JText field, which is part of our top panel. Then our bottom panel contains our 9 calculator buttons, which is shaped as a 3 by 3 table or 3 by 3 grid. Next, we're going to discuss border layouts. Border layouts organizes your components into borders. Border layouts contain 5 types of borders. We have the north border, we have the line start border, or also known as the left border, line end border, which is the right border, and the bottom border, also known as the page end border, and lastly the center border. In our constructor, we have our top panel, which would be for our north border. So we're going to have BorderLayout.north. Next, we're going to have our left panel, added to the left border, which is also known as the line start border. Our right panel is going to be added to the line in border, which is the right border. Our panel center is all center, self-explanatory. And then our bottom panel is going to be added to our border layout.page in, which is the bottom border. So when we run our program, we have our top border, which is orange, our left border, which is green, our center border, which is Carolina blue, our right border, which is just blue, and then our bottom border with the color yellow. Now let's move on to the card layout. Card layouts treat your GUI components like a deck of cards. For our card layout example, we're going to have 3 pages of JPanels. For our data fields, we have our main panel, our first panel, second panel, and our third panel. Our constructor, our main panel is initialized, our card layout is initialized. We set the layout of our main panel to the card layout. Then we have to also add our main panel to our JFrame. Our first panel has a label, first page, a button, next page, which will go to the second page of our card layout. Then we need to add our first panel to our main panel. So our main panel is going to say add panel 1, comma, string 1. So the string 1 is just a label we use for our JPanel or our GUI component that we want to add to the other GUI component. You can give this string any characters, any set of characters. But for today's example, to give it more structure, we're just going to say 1. So panel 1 with the label of 1 in string is going to be added to our main panel. Then we're going to show our main panel, which points to 1, which points to our first panel, and is going to be shown on our card layout. The same goes for our second panel. We have a label, second page. We have a button that goes to the first page, a J button that goes to the third page. And then we're going to add our second panel with the label 2 in string to our main panel. But we don't show our second panel to our card layout. And for our third panel, we have our label third page, and then we have the option to go to the previous page, which is the second page, and then go to the first page of our card layout. In our action perform method, we're going to say if the user clicks next page, which is associated with our first panel, our card layout is going to show the second panel in our main panel. If they pick page 1 button, which is associated with the second page, our card layout is going to show the first panel on our main panel. Then for our third or page 3 button, which is associated with our second panel, will show the third page. Then the second page button, which is associated with our third panel, will show the second panel. And the first page button, also associated with our third panel, will show the first panel. So let's run the program. We have our first panel, or we have our card layout show our first panel. Then if we click next, our card layout is showing our second panel. Then we have the option to go to the first page, which goes back, or we can go to the next page, which is the third page. And then our third page, which our card layout is showing, we can do previous page button or go to the first page. And that sums up the card layout. So those are the basics of layouts in Java. If you have any questions, comment below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. All right, thank you for watching.